Well, let's get more on this from Ruvi Zeigler. He's an associate professor of international refugee law at the University of Reading. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. I mean, this has been described by critics as just the latest whack-a-mole policy by the British government. What's your assessment?
Well, look, I mean, I think today is a very bleak day. It's a day when essentially the UK Parliament has passed legislation which, according to the UNHCR, according to every refugee scholar globally, frankly, breaches the UK's international refugee law obligations and human rights obligations. And we know this because the government on the face of the bill has said that it cannot state that it is compatible with the European Convention of Human Rights. And not only that, when the House of Lords tried to put in an amendment to this bill, saying that the bill will only operate in compliance with international law, the government struck that amendment down. And so the bill effectively admits to not being in compliance with international law. So I think we need to start from there. It's a bleak day for not just for the UK, but for the refugee law regime more generally.
And if we pick up then with the migration bill, which ping-ponged between the two houses of government here in the UK, does it as yet remain unclear what will happen to those who come here, in the government's words, illegally?
Right. So this is where your reporter's kind of description of these barges, comes handy. Right. Ultimately, the government recognizes that the people who come to the UK primarily come from countries where they do face a risk of persecution. This is why it can't return them to those countries. But the new act will prevent them from applying to asylum in the UK. And so the government's hoping to be able to send them to another country and in the interim hold them in detention or other facilities. The problem for the government is that it, until today, has only reached an agreement with one country, Rwanda. And just a couple of weeks ago, the Court of Appeal in this country found that that agreement and the conditions currently in Rwanda would mean that any return there would breach the UK's international obligations, so they can't be done. So at the moment, the UK has one agreement which it cannot implement. And so the consequence is that all those people arriving who very well likely have valid protection claims, judging from the last few years' statistics, will not be able to apply for asylum. The UK government will not be able to remove them. And so we will end up having to host them indefinitely in lamentable conditions.
Yeah, and the government's trying to cut costs, and that's one of the reasons they've gone for this option of the barge. And when it comes to that, clearly they're trying to show taxpayers, look, we're trying to save money here, and we're also not going to put asylum seekers in nice, comfortable accommodation. They're also trying to send a message to asylum seekers to say, well, if you do come here, your accommodation will be functional and basic. Is there any way that the barge or schemes like that might act as a deterrent?
Well, look, the reality is that a very small number of people, as a part of the global refugee displacement movement, ends up in the UK. And the people who end up in the UK would ordinarily be people who have either family connections or other links to the UK, which drives them to come to the UK specifically. And they will still seek to do that because they actually know they can't be removed back to their country of origin. And they know the UK is unable to return them anywhere else. And so the consequence is that I agree with you. It is going to be costly, but the solution to it being costly is an entirely different one. It's to speed up and make the asylum process an efficient one, to recognize people as refugees, and in the interim, when they have their asylum application processed, allow them to work, as most European countries do, in which case they will be contributing to society rather than having to rely on government support. So the government, in many ways, has got this entirely the wrong way around. And it's no wonder people in the neighboring towns are frustrated because they know that this is not really a solution. It's just gamemanship.
Ruvi, we thank you very much indeed for coming on the News Hour. Appreciate your analysis.
Thanks very much.